Hello, and welcome to the Jesus-Centered Life Conference. I'm Pinky Escasa, and I'm a bipolar depressed person. Bipolar depressed is not my professional title, okay? I didn't study to become mentally ill. Neither is bipolar depressed my label. I introduce myself this way to get it out of the way so you don't have to keep wondering about why I'm giving this talk. I really don't know what I can tell you because I don't know how much you know about mental illness and what else you want to know about mental health challenges. Mental health challenges is actually a new phrase to me. I heard my psychiatrist friend use that phrase a few days ago. I don't know how exactly what it means or how it's being used, but what I do know is it sounds like a very politically correct term. My contention with that phrase, mental health challenges, is it makes mental health sound too nice. It also makes mental illness sound less heavy than it is in actuality. What I mean is, the term mental health challenges seem to make light of what it really means to be mentally ill. Because although yes, a mental condition like depression, anxiety, bipolar, schizophrenia can be challenging, and they do count as challenges, but they are nonetheless an illness. An illness isn't the same as a disease. Cancer is a disease. It needs to be cured. But anxiety, depression, bipolar are illnesses because they can't be cured. They can only be managed. Persons like me who suffer them can only recover from them, be in remission from them, but never be cured of them. I really wish that you could just ask me questions about what it's really like to be depressed because it would make having to explain it easier. If you've been clinically diagnosed with a mental condition, I think that it'll be easier for you to understand me because we speak the same language. It isn't easy to explain what it's like to have a mental condition to someone who's mentally healthy. But just the same, I will try. I was diagnosed with bipolar depression 4 years ago. How did I know? I went to see a psychiatrist, and based on some tests, she told me that I am depressed, bipolar. Also, she knew it from my family history. My father is bipolar. But even before I went to seek professional help 4 years ago, I already knew that I was depressed, and I went to see a doctor to seek confirmation of my suspicion and to ask help with how I can manage it. The road to recovery of a person beset by mental health challenges starts by acknowledging that one is sick. You can't really bring yourself to see a doctor if you don't think there's anything wrong with you, right? It doesn't make sense to see your family doctor when he asks you, "What's the matter?" You say, "Gee, doc, I really don't know." It isn't a surprise if she kicks you out of his office for wasting his time. That's the thing with being mentally ill. We have to recognize that there's something mentally wrong with us, and that's the only time we can bring ourselves to consult a doctor. A person who refuses to acknowledge that she is depressed will never really recover because in her mind, there's nothing to recover from. So why should she undertake something that it isn't there? When I was newly diagnosed of my bipolar depression, I had to tell one of my superiors of my diagnosis because I felt that they had the right to know. Anyway, so one morning I sat in private with one of them and she asked, "So, what is it like to be depressed?" I had no real answer to give her then because depression was a very new thing to me. I know what it means enough because I've read about it and everybody seems to talk about it, but I couldn't explain what depression was like for me. For me. When I say for me, I really mean for me. Because that's what mental illness is. It's a unique experience for each one. It's unique because there are many factors and variables involved in being mentally ill. For starters, my physiological makeup is my own. It's influenced by my genetic dispositions, my diet, my lifestyle, the stresses I went through. Taking that way, the mental health challenge of one person is like her thumb mark. Let me further explain. So you all know what depression is, right? There can be 20, 30, 100 people listening to me right now who may have been diagnosed clinically depressed. All 101 of us may be classified depressed, but we also have 101 versions of that depression. My friend who studied positive psychology was explaining to me the other day what positive psychology is about. She told me about the PERMA model. Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, achievement. These are all very good ideas, I told her. I'm sure it will work. But I was explaining to her that for us who are suffering depression or some other mental health challenge, to apply those methods and put them into action is an entirely different matter. We know that we need to foster positive emotions. We know that we need to be engaged in life, develop genuine relationships, have purpose and meaning. But that knowledge is one end of a pole. At the other end is where we stand. The problem that every mentally ill person needs to figure out and answer is, how do I get from where I am to that other end so I can live a fulfilling life in spite of my condition? All the encouragement and support we get from family, friends, and other concerned individuals help in our recovery. However, in the end, it's up to the person who suffered the depression to get herself out of that depressive state and move towards recovery. To get from point A to point B requires a struggle. It means exerting the necessary effort to recover. It means willing to live a normal life as we possibly can, all things considered. So as I said, a person who refuses to acknowledge that she is sick will not recover. A person who acknowledges that she is sick needs to likewise see that she needs to get professional care. If she doesn't see this as something she needs for herself so she can recover faster compared to doing it on her own, she will not bring herself to see a doctor. A person who goes to seek professional help has to diligently take medications and monitor her reaction to the medication. If she doesn't diligently drink her meds, it's quite useless to see a psychiatrist. Then a person who religiously takes all her meds and regularly sees her psychiatrist has to teach herself to manage her thoughts, her emotions, and her behavior. This she has to mainly do on her own. If I don't do this, manage my mind, my emotions, and control how they affect my behavior, there won't have much going on for me as far as recovery is concerned. The battle that daily happens to a person who suffers depression is the mind. What I have to struggle with at every moment is my mind and myself. Myself. 2 words. And I say struggle with, not struggle against. Because we aren't really fighting for domination but for harmonious existence. The battle isn't between the once normal self regaining the throne or the sick and new self having dominion over the old. It's about trying to reconcile those 2 aspects of myself and to see them as part of who I am. That my mental illness is now part of my whole self and that it doesn't define who I am as a person. My mental illness is another facet of myself that came to me at a point in time as the other facets of myself became me at some point in my life. My being a daughter when I was born, a sibling, a friend when I started school, a colleague when I started working, a wife on my wedding day, a mother on with the birth of my first child. I have to recognize all those aspects of being me and make them all to work together so I can be an awesome me. I think that the struggle to recovery for a mental health challenge happens in 3 levels. First is at the physical level. As I said earlier, if one doesn't take medications when one needs it, recovery won't happen as readily and more easily. I think that reading self-help books or willing myself to recover won't help balance the chemicals in my brain or put order in my neurotransmitters. I need the help of medicines so I can have some sort of a head start or an advantage in the attempt to manage my illness. The second level is effort. The medicines can only help so much. There's a ceiling to how they can lessen the symptoms of depression. The person who has to deal with mental health challenges has to deal with them. So if I don't control my low moods and if I allow it to get the better of me, my progress towards recovery will be slower. If I don't exert the effort to make sense of my illness and to understand it as well as I could, I really can't get better as quickly as I want to. If this means getting up from my bed and taking a shower and putting on makeup, then I have to do it if I am to push myself towards recovery. Let's go back to PERMA and all the encouraging words we are offered. Offered, that's what they are. They're offering suggestions that we can either take or throw away. Even when we decide to take the advice that we are given and acknowledge the good that proven psychotherapy methods can give us, it's still up to us to put all those techniques and advice into practice. It's up to us to make our recovery an actuality. The thing with mental illness being unique to the individual person who suffers it, it's only that person who can really figure out how to get from the end of the pole where she's at to the other end where recovery stands. What works for me in living out the suggestions that psychotherapy or positive psychology offer won't necessarily work for another mentally ill person because her struggles are her own. Only she can see what she needs to fight. Only she can say how much she wants to fight. It's only she who can say how she wants to fight. And only she can choose to win or lose the fight of each moment. So effort is what spells a difference in recovery. I say a difference and not the difference because it's only one item in the equation. The third level of the struggle towards recovery happens in the spirit. I said in my book that to suffer a mental illness isn't a question of simply enduring it. That is waiting it out until it goes away because it won't. To endure something also doesn't have a generous ring to it. Endurance also implies banking on physical strength. Thus, to face a challenge is not just about enduring it, but what gives suffering its true value is to see it for what it is. An inevitable part of life that makes our life complete, and it needs to be faced with courage. To come to terms with mental illness or any difficulty for that matter isn't just about being brave about it. Because to be brave, which is to endure or face unpleasant conditions or behavior without showing fear, isn't enough. If we are to suffer nobly and with dignity, we need to be ready to face suffering, difficulty, pain, grief, death with courage. Courage implies harnessing strength within us. It means not just having a proper perspective of our illness and the challenges that come with it, but it also means understanding it. That is finding the meaning and purpose behind being mentally ill and valuing it for what it can positively bring into one's life. Because all kinds of difficulties, challenges, unpleasant situations can make us stronger and better persons if we allow them to work towards our own development. If we don't see this facet of life this way, we will simply sit through our life, suffer its challenges by just waiting for them to be over. It means simply surviving life and not actually living it. What can help a person with mental health challenges to move faster towards recovery is not just hope, but it also requires faith. Because even if I may see that there is a future of recovery waiting for me at the end of the road, but if I do not believe that I can get there, I won't exert the effort to realize that hope. I know that I can gain grace even when I pray in desperation, and I know that that grace will one day pull together to get me out of this very depressed state. But also, I have to have faith that that grace is working and that I need to do my share of the work. The struggle towards recovery, as I said, has to happen on these three levels simultaneously. As I've mentioned, medications can only do so much. To exert physical effort can tire us out if we're simply relying on our own efforts. On the other hand, praying unceasingly without doing anything isn't going to get us anywhere either. Sure, we can always pray and hope for a miracle, but let's face it, some personal effort is involved in making that miracle happen. Saints had to make sacrifices. They had to adhere to what they saw in prayer as God's will for them. They had to exert the effort required to fulfill their missions. The miracles didn't happen while they sat idle. To flourish in depression means fighting the battle in all those three levels. It means discovering for yourself what your illness means to you and for you. And what's the best way that you must personally employ in order to cover the distance between your current depressed state and the point of recovery that is meant for you. I'm not offering advice. I'm not advocating any proven method. All I'm saying is we all suffer. And whether the suffering is great or small, we all suffer just the same. But we suffer our suffering individually and as individuals. In the same way that only I can live through the suffering that life presents me, and only I can answer to the challenges it asks me to face them with courage, to deny that they're there, to simply be resigned to them, the choice of a response is mine. And that choice and that decision to act on that response is what will spell the difference between my flourishing or my languishing in this life. To flourish in depression is a choice. It's a decision that needs to be put into action. It's a responsibility that one has to be accountable for. And this responsibility means being responsible for oneself. It means choosing to understand what this illness is about and what meaning it holds in one's life. To flourish or to languish, that is the question that life poses to us daily. And for a person like me who suffers from bipolar depression, it's a question that life asks me at every moment. What do you want to do about your illness? What do you want to happen to your life? And the response I choose to give to life's questions is what will spell the difference in my ability and capacity to flourish even when I'm beset by depression. Thank you for listening.